Hello, thank you for coming back. This is the Non-Qualified Evangelist, episode 34. We're reading Exodus chapters 21 and 22. But first, let's talk about the previous chapter. We read that these guys, they're wandering through the desert. Well, you know what? They anger. Maybe not so easily, but they definitely anger. And when they anger, they go all in on their anger. So there's a series of, spectacular events that all serve to demonstrate that God is for these people. He's not against them. Ultimately, they arrive to Mount Sinai, where God says, I'm going to give Moses, I'm going to give you a little boost to your credibility, put a little bit of authority in your step, let you and I have a conversation in front of all these kids. And, it does the trick, man. They see this and they decide for themselves, this is probably more than what we can handle. Moses, would you consider being the go-between? God is speaking to Moses up on Mount Sinai, and he is delivering to him the 10 Commandments, which in no small way direct the way that God expects for these people to consider him, but also to consider each other. Remember, they have agreed to become this nation of ministers. They're not going to be known for like architecture. That's not their gig. They're not going to be artists. They're going to be known as a nation of priests who minister to God. So, these 10 Commandments, man, they likely reflected Abraham's feelings towards God and the way Abraham interacted with the people that were around him. I mean, who's to say that God wasn't saying these exact things to Abraham and he just did it? So, but these people that are coming out of Egyptian slavery from an oppressed state, it's not likely that they're going to look at these rules and just sort of say, yeah, this makes total sense to me. I'm absolutely going to do it. Remember, though, at this point in the story, the Hebrews don't actually know any of these rules yet. Moses is still getting the download up on the mountain. So I could imagine there's going to probably need to be some period for these guys to kind of get the hang of these new rules. Not looking at your neighbor's Porsche and wishing you had one. This one is going to be a difficult one for these guys to swallow. Although it's not going to be a Porsche, it's going to be a donkey or something. So in either way, it's essentially the same thing. And this is where they are. Let's pray. Father, thank you for bringing us to this point in this story. As we walk into the part where there are lots of rules, it's going to take a special eye to understand how these things look and a special ear to kind of understand what it is exactly that these rules are intended to do. So help us to understand as we continue these readings. This is what we're asking for now. Thank you. Amen. Exodus 21. And these are the ordinances that you shall place before them. If you buy a Jewish bondsman, he shall work for 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go free for no charge. If he shall arrive by himself, he shall leave by himself. If he is the husband of a woman, his wife shall leave with him. If his master will give him a woman, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall belong to her master, and he shall go out by himself. But if the bondsman shall say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I shall not go free. Then his master shall bring him to the court, and shall bring him to the door or to the doorpost, and his master shall bore through his ear with the awl, and he shall serve him forever. If a man will sell his daughter as a bondswoman, she shall not leave like the leave-taking of the slaves. If she is displeasing in the eyes of her master, who should have designated her for himself, he shall assist in her redemption. He shall not have the power to sell her to a strange man, for he had betrayed her. If he had designated her for his son, he shall deal with her according to the rights of the young woman. If he shall take another in addition to her, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, or her marital relationship. If he does not perform these 3 for her, she shall leave free of charge, without payment. One who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. But for one who had not lain in ambush, and God had caused it to come to his hand, I shall provide you a place to which he shall flee. If a man shall act intentionally against his fellow to murder him with guile, from my altar shall you take him to die. One who strikes his father or mother shall surely be put to death. One who kidnaps a man and sells him, and he was found to have been in his power, shall surely be put to death. One who curses his father or mother shall surely be put to death. If men quarrel, and one strikes his fellow with a stone or with a fist, and he does not die but falls into bed, if he gets up and goes about outside under his own power, the one who struck is absolved. Only for his lost time shall he pay, and he shall provide for healing. If a man shall strike his slave or maidservant with the rod, and he shall die under his hand, he shall surely be avenged. But if he will survive for a day or two, he shall not be avenged, for he is his property. If men shall fight, and they collide with a pregnant woman, and she miscarries, but there will be no fatality, he shall surely be punished as the husband of the woman shall cause to be assessed against him, and he shall pay it by order of judges. But if there shall be a fatality, then you shall award a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot, a burn for a burn, a wound for a wound, a bruise for a bruise. If a man shall strike the eye of his slave or the eye of his maidservant and destroy it, he shall set him free in return for his eye. And if he knocks out the tooth of his slave or the tooth of his maidservant, he shall set him free in return for his tooth. If an ox shall gore a man or woman and he shall die, the ox shall surely be stoned. Its flesh may not be eaten, and the owner of the ox shall be innocent. But if it was an ox that gores habitually from yesterday and the day before yesterday, and its owners had been warned but did not guard it, and it killed a man or woman, the ox shall be stoned, and even its owner shall die. When an atonement payment shall be assessed against him, he shall pay as a redemption for his life whatever shall be assessed against him, whether it gores a boy or it gores a girl, in accordance with this judgment shall be done to him. If the ox shall gore a slave or maidservant, 30 silver shekels shall he give to his master, and the ox shall be stoned. If a man shall uncover a pit, or if a man shall dig a pit and not cover it, and an ox or a donkey fall into it, the owner of the pit shall make restitution. He shall return money to its owner, and the carcass shall be his. If one man's ox shall strike his fellow's ox which dies, they shall sell the living ox and divide its money, and the carcass too shall they divide. But if it becomes known that it was an ox that had gored habitually from yesterday and before yesterday, but its owner did not guard it, he shall surely pay an ox in place of the ox, and the carcass shall be his. If a man shall steal an ox, a sheep or goat, and slaughter it or sell it, he shall pay 5 cattle in place of the ox, and 4 sheep in place of the sheep. Exodus 22. If the thief is discovered while tunneling in, and he is struck and dies, there is no blood guilt on his account. If the sun shone upon him, there is blood guilt on his account. He shall make restitution. If he has nothing, he shall be sold for his theft. If the theft shall be found in his possession, whether a live ox or donkey or sheep or goat, he shall pay double. If a man permits livestock to devour a field or vineyard, whether he set loose his livestock or he grazed it in another's field, from the best of his field and the best of his vineyard shall he pay. If a fire shall go forth and find thorns, and a stack of grain, or a standing crop or a field is consumed, the one who kindled the fire shall make restitution. If a man shall give money or vessels to his fellow to safeguard, and it is stolen from the house of the man, if the thief is found, he shall pay double. If the thief is not found, then the householder shall approach the court that he had not laid his hand upon his fellow's property. For every item of liability, whether an ox, a donkey, a sheep, or a garment, regarding any lost item about which he says, "This is it," to the court shall come both their claims. Whomever the court finds guilty shall pay double to his fellow. If a man shall give his fellow a donkey, or an ox, or a sheep, or any animal to safeguard, and it died, or was broken, or was looted, without an eyewitness, an oath of Hashem shall be between them both, that he did not lay his hand upon the property of his fellow. The owner shall accept it, and he shall not pay. If it shall be stolen from him, he shall pay to its owner. If it shall be torn to death, he shall produce a witness. For a torn animal he does not pay. If a man shall borrow from his fellow, and it shall become broken or shall die, provided its owner is not with him, he shall surely make restitution. If its owner is with him, he shall not make restitution. If he was a renter, it came in return for his rental. If a man shall seduce a virgin who was not betrothed and lie with her, he shall provide her with a marriage contract as his wife. If her father refuses to give her to him, he shall weigh out silver according to the marriage contract of the virgins. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. Anyone who lies with an animal shall surely be put to death. One who brings offerings to the gods shall be destroyed, only to Hashem alone. You shall not taunt or oppress a stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall not cause pain to any widow or orphan, if you dare to cause him pain. For if he shall cry out to me, I shall surely hear his outcry. My wrath shall blaze, and I shall kill you by the sword, and your wives will be widows, and your children orphans. When you lend money to people, to the poor person who is with you, do not act toward him as a creditor. Do not lay interest upon him. If you take your fellow's garment as security, until sunset shall you return it to him. For it alone is his clothing. It is his garment for his skin. In what should he lie down? So it will be that if he cries out to me, I shall listen, for I am compassionate. You shall not revile God, and you shall not curse a leader among your people. Do not delay your fullness offering, or your priestly heave offering. The firstborn of your sons shall you present to me. So shall you do to your ox, to your flock. For a 7-day period shall it be with its mother. On the 8th day you may present it to me. People of holiness shall you be to me. You shall not eat flesh of an animal that was torn in the field. To the dog shall you throw it. Okay, this is Exodus 21:22. We see some detail about what it is exactly that God is expecting for the way these people are going to interact with each other. For example, you can sell yourself, you can be purchased. In fact, it's entirely possible that a man who sold himself to another man to pay off his debt may have developed a beautiful working relationship with this man and has a family and just loves the whole scenario. And he may say to himself, I don't want to not work for you. And if this be the case, then this rule here says no problem. Owner who's happy to have this guy work for you, and guy that's working who loves your owner, go to the courthouse and take a massive nail and hammer it through the bondsman's ear. This is not humiliating at all. This is totally normal. So when you walk around at the market, super happy that you're living in this wonderful place and you've got this great job with his owner, you'll have a massive hole in your ear and everybody will know that this is what you've done and this is a good thing. It doesn't make any sense. It seems like this would be maybe humiliating. So I wonder, is God saying, yes, you can do this, but you got to really, really, really want it? So does this point towards the preference for there to not be bondsmen and not be owners? It is interesting at least to consider. It speaks of accidental death and dismemberment, malice, intentionality, like evil, and then like accident. And in each of these categories, there seems to be a value assessed for the wrong done. There's a penalty, and you have to pay that penalty. And then the bombshell, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, all this sort of stuff. It comes from this part in the story where, if this pregnant woman loses her baby because some knucklehead was acting like a fool, then his penalty is a life for a life. And then it goes on to say an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The following verses describe these slaves who have a really filthy and violent owner. And the owner, in a fit of rage, beats these people up, and one person loses an eye, the other person loses a tooth. But the slave owner doesn't lose his eye, or they don't pull a tooth out like to compensate this slave for the loss of his tooth. Actually, what ends up happening is they say, you know what, slave, you're totally free now. So the balance of this equation, the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, it seems to me like this is assessing the value of a person's loss. This is a scale of compensation on the varying degrees of what is right and what is wrong. But could you imagine this being the penal system? It seems to me inconsistent with what God is trying to tell these people about how they are supposed to be. Imagine, he wants these people to be ministers to represent him to the whole world. However, he also wants them to be mutilated, like some don't have hands and others don't have eyes, and half of a person's teeth is ripped out of their face. The message doesn't seem to be consistent. So it seems to me more of a methodology in viewing what constitutes the punishment that fits the crime. Recognizing that if you cause damage to another person, that damage is going to be caused to you. That definitely does create an awareness that the Hebrews need to recognize. They need to be considerate. I think today, in today's vernacular, we would probably call this something like personal responsibility. Or, take responsibility for your actions, or be considerate of others, or something along those lines. Sorcery, filthy, miserable, disgusting sexual behavior, seduction, theft, idolatry, opportunism. These are characteristics of a normal society. God says this has no place in a nation full of ministers. He specifically forbids it. There are specific rules regarding financial transactions with poor, restrictions on the collateral. You can't take this man's blanket. This is what he's sleeping in. You've got 50 blankets. He has no blankets. Give him his blanket so that he can sleep. You can't treat people this way. Remember, you were a slave in Egypt and it sucked then. So you can't now create that same situation for other people. So where you see pharaohs and kings of this time and of this era piecing together massive military force and all these armies and taking over other people's lands for the purposes of getting rich and expanding on that same power, God is building a system among these Hebrews where, number one, you got to recognize who God is. That has to be above all of these other things. Number two is considering that you recognize what God is to you, that should impact and influence the way you are treating the people who are around you. And if it all works out beautifully, then you will cooperate and things will go well. But there won't be a king or a pharaoh that's sort of dictating these rules to you. The rules have been dictated to you by God. So this is definitely a different sort of a setup. There's a lot still left of this story. Stick around. Episode number 35 is coming. Well, I can't be responsible for my lion. I can't be responsible for my elephant. Or the NQE is out. Forever. No, just for now.